When the world was a little younger, fairy tales were always true. Every face was filled with laughter. Every day brought something new. Summertime seemed to last forever. Friends would come and friends would go, but their warmth would always linger in the days when time ran slow. Make the world a little younger, let the laughter in. Yesterday was filled with magic. Bring it back again. Make the world a little younger. Wear a happy face. When the world's a little younger, life's a brighter place. When the world was a little younger, love was just a smile away. There was time for going fishing and the games we used to play. Make the world a little younger, let the laughter in. Yesterday was filled with magic. Bring it back again. Make the world a little younger. Let the laughter in. Yesterday was filled with magic. Bring it back again. Make the world a little younger. Let the laughter in. Yesterday was filled with magic. Bring it back again. Make the world a little younger. Let the laughter in. Yesterday was filled with magic. Bring it back again.
Thank you, Shirley Bassey. And I wonder if, like me, the words of that song made you think of Tom in his younger days, those free, loving younger days, which you hear a little bit about today. And I think that was a perfect start to a celebration of Tom's life. I've got to tell you, I was absolutely honoured and thrilled when Kerry, Tom's daughter, phoned and asked me to be today's celebrant. It does mean a lot to me because over the past 40 years I got to know Tom and Lee and members of his family, some of them better than others, but certainly Tom and Lee I got to know very, very well. And you know, my connections to the Dumpleton family go back even before I knew Tom and Lee. 1984, or it could have been 1985, it's going back, almost 40 years ago. I was teaching history at Gorican High School, and in my Year 10 history class, Kerry Dumpleton. And what a pupil she was. She was the model student. She was so enthusiastic. She loved her history, she loved learning about things, and she was always inquiring about what was going on, and she'd stay behind sometimes after lessons to ask questions and to discuss what we had done. And it was only after I actually retired from Apex in 1987, in Apex you did in those days, you don't now, you had to compulsorily retire at age 40, and for me that was 1987. And I immediately moved into a group called Apex 40, which was a group for former ex-Apexians who got together to renew the friendship and continue the fellowship. And that's when I got to meet Tom and Lee, because they were already members of Wyong Apex Club. And then, of course, I came to the realisation that Kerry was their daughter, and I remembered Kerry very well. And I can tell you, when you're teaching, when you have students like Kerry, they're the ones you remember, and they're the ones when you retire, as I did a few years ago, you look back very, very fondly on those students who made it all worthwhile, all those years in the classroom. So Kerry, from me to you, thank you very much for that. Can I welcome you here on behalf of all the family? The dealings I have had have been with Kerry for this funeral, but I know that Kevin, Gary and Stephen were involved as well. But on their behalf, they've asked me to thank you all for your attendance. Every society has developed rites to mark the passage from life to death. And today we do this through what we call a funeral service. So let's join together as we say our goodbyes and thank yous to Tom. First of all, we have a reading from two of Tom's grandchildren, Alicia King and Robert King. Would you like to come forward? Just the height of that if need be.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alicia, Kerry's daughter and Tom's granddaughter, and this is my brother Robert.
We all know that the circus was a big part of Grandad's life, from when he was a part of Worst Circus to being head of the Circus Fans Australasia Club years later. We both always loved hearing stories about Grandad being in the circus, many of these stories later being used for various school assignments and projects.
We are incredibly grateful that we got to spend so much time with Grandad, especially thanks to the family effort in producing the Fanfare magazine every 2 months.
This poem is an excerpt from a 2020 edition of Fanfare, which greatly expresses Grandad's deep connection with the circus lifestyle and culture. Grandad said, "Many of my friends are related to me through the circus, and they understand this. But for those of you who are not from that world, I'd like to share with you as it so accurately describes our day-to-day, mostly unspoken values."
Imagine a place where you feel perfectly accepted, where people from all countries meet and live together, where everyone has a pet and looks after them, where people live side by side with animals, where parents work hard and children thrive, where everyone in community cares for each other, where people meet even for a short time and work together and remain friends for the rest of their lives, where whatever language you speak, people communicate, where your problem is my problem and mine is yours, where nothing cannot be resolved, where the aim of everyone is to make others happy. That is the circus. We will miss you so much, Grandad. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Kerry. And Kerry, I should mention too that I believe, this makes me very pleased too, that you have been accepted to study at Macquarie University and you are keen on studying ancient history, which is lovely. Well done. Yes. Yeah, and thanks for those words there. I imagine, I'm thinking of John Lennon and the similar type of thoughts that came through as Robert and Alicia read that there. I'm going to start talking about Tom and then I'm going to ask Kerry to tell you more about him from the perspective of his daughter. So Tom Arthur Dumpleton was born on the 14th of March 1938 in Sydney. He was a son to Harry and Dot Dumpleton. loving father and devoted husband to Lee, father to Stephen, Kevin, Gary and Kerry, brother to Joan and Ken, grandfather to Matthew, Michael, Elise, Mark, Kim, Tash, Alicia and Robert. A very committed Apexian and subsequently to that a member of Apex 40. Tom was a lion, he was a loyal neighbour, a circus member and fan, and friend of course to so many. When Tom was young, his family moved around a fair bit. He recalled moving to Emerald in Queensland during the war for his dad to work with his brother in the bakery. When they returned from Queensland, they lived in Box Hill, Castle Hill, Northmead, and Tom remembers going to school there at some stage, and Narrabeen and Narraweena. Times were very tough when Tom was young, and in fact, not only did he leave school, but he left home at age 14 to save his parents from having to feed an extra person. He went to the country and got jobs working on farms, selling oranges, and doing whatever it took to keep himself fed and sheltered. Tom met Lee when he was working with his father, converting the old picture theatre at Harbord into squash courts. Lee lived across the road, and she took a particular interest in the handsome young redhead who was working there. And from that, of course, the romance blossomed. I was asking about what jobs Tom had, and there were just too many to list. I just went on and on. But two key things stick out were, one was the spit towing services. He owned and operated that. And when he moved to the Central Coast, Wyong driveway services. And he also owned and operated that. He built many driveways and footpaths around the area and was known to many for his kind and fair service. And he was quite a sight around. I remember driving around the streets of Gorican occasionally, and there was the old blue truck with Tom there, working away as he always did, and always with a friendly smile. And I used to think, my heavens, at his age he's still doing this. But he did, and he was a tough old bloke, he really was, and very resolute. He was very keen on his community, volunteering and serving. He joined Apex in DY, he was a life member there. He came to Woy Woy, and I think he might have been made a life member there, but I'm not 100% sure of that. He held many positions in those Apex clubs, and then he moved on to Apex Club, which of course is where I met him. In Balgowlah, he joined Lions, and then he moved to Toukley, where he helped his daughter Kerry set up the Toukley Leos Club. He was involved in View Club and Red Cross. He wasn't a member, but Lee was, and she couldn't have done it without her husband. He took her everywhere she needed to go and carried everything for her. And I can still see him doing that in one of those old Valiants he had. Remember those old Valiants he used to love driving? Quite a sight. Then he was involved with an organisation called the Shirley Shuttle, which was a cancer patient bus. He was a volunteer driver after he had his cancer operations. Circus Fans of Australia. That organisation, he held the positions of Secretary, Treasurer, Membership Officer and Editor of Fanfare, their club magazine. In Apex and Apex 40, both those organisations, he was the heart and soul of both of them. In Apex, he organised trips to conventions around Australia with busloads of New Zealanders. He even drove the bus from Sydney to the Gold Coast and another time to Melbourne, bringing New Zealanders around to show them that part of Australia. He billeted Apexians from overseas and hosted exchange students through Apex. These are all the things that Lee and Tom did together. Apex may have been a men's service clubs in those days, but the reality was the women did just as much of the work. And of course, we must remember their families as well, who became involved in it, as Kerry told me about how she became involved in Apex. In Apex 40, where I knew Tom, he and Lee organised all sorts of things. He had organised weekends away. We had nights out at the Wyong Drama Group. He was our dinner notice editor for quite some time, and he loved doing that, and he was very, very good at it. In the old days, it was something that you ran off on a Gestetner, put a postage stamp on it and mailed it to the club member. But when he embraced technology, and I've got to tell you, he really embraced technology in a big way, he became very, very efficient and proficient at doing those dinner notices, not only for Apex 40, but also for the Fanfare magazine. And I still remember the type of things he did. He learnt the technology, got very, very keen on the computer, very proud of how he could put it all together. And one year he won the National Award for the best dinner notice in Australia, and he was very, very proud of that one. And I always remember, just a little anecdote, he used to put lots of jokes in, but unlike lots of magazine editors around Australia, not one of them was even remotely risque. They were all clean and straight down the line. But other ones around the country, they get their jokes out of Playboy and whack those in and what have you. But I could see the irony in that, because sometimes at Apex 40 meetings, someone might get up and tell a bit of a risque joke, which Tom never did, of course. But when someone got up and told one, you know who laughed loudest? It was Tom. He used to roar his head off. The dirtier the joke, the louder he'd laugh. So a bit of a contrast there. And I have to mention, Tom was very, very supportive of me when I became National President of Apex 40. We were at a convention in Adelaide, and he gave me a lot of encouragement to do that. So I owe Tom a lot for sort of pushing me into an area that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. So for that, I thank him. What were his interests? Well, I was aware he had an interest in horse racing, and I became aware of that initially on some of these weekends that he and Lee would organise for Apex 40, because he'd be sitting down there on a Saturday morning and he'd have the form guide out, and he would be telling me the best bets of the day. And he's one of these blokes, when he worked out the bets, he was convinced it was going to win. And he had all the right reasons. Like the apprentice jockey's got a 1.5 kilo allowance, and last race it ran over 1,200 metres and it ran short. So it needs a longer distance. This is a 1,400, so it'll do better this time. And he had all the right reasons why this horse was going to win. And he sounded very convincing. But he also, I don't know what the story was, but there was a jockey by the name of Patrick Payne. And Tom used to back him all the time. And I thought I'd do a bit of research on this when I was preparing for today. And I checked out this Paddy Payne. He was a Victorian-based trainer, and he had a success rate of 17%. So Tom, if you can hear me, that means 83% of his races it's going to lose. You were never going to become a millionaire, Tom, through punting. But he enjoyed it. And also Harold Park trots, and I think sometimes the children went with him to Harold Park trots on a Friday night. The circus. As he started to wind down his work, he began to take a lot more interest in his past, and the circus was his favourite. He spent many hours searching Google, this is a computer coming out now, for Worth Circus information, and developed quite a collection of Worth Circus memorabilia. He used to go to garage sales and bring back clowns and elephants for Lee. He said that they made her happy, but Kerry tells me she reckons that really they were for him as much as her, but of course he'd never admit that. Guest speaker, we at Apex 40 heard him a couple of times talking about his experiences with Worth Circus back in the day, and he'd always have things to show around, bits of magazines and programs and photos, and he just loved it, and his enthusiasm shone through. And that was a real interest in his later life, because it became, very time-consuming for him, but he loved it, and he did such a good job, and he just loved sharing his memories about those heady days as a member of the Worth Circus troupe. They had annual Gascoyne Road Christmas parties, rain, hail, or shine, or COVID. Tom always wanted to have the neighbours' Christmas party every year, with a select few wonderful people that were always there for he and Lee. And Tom always enjoyed a yarn, as everyone who's ever got stuck with him at a meeting. Even Gordon, who did Tom's lawns, said that mowing the lawns won't be the same, as he enjoyed hearing Tom's stories while he was doing it. Many tributes have come through following the news of Tom's death, and too many to read out here, and if you're interested in seeing them, I think Facebook might have a pretty good collection. But two I want to read to you, mainly because of the people they've come from. The first one I have here is from Michael Robertson, who was the ringmaster, and I assume that means president, of the Circus Fans of Australasia Incorporated. And he's in Frankston in Victoria, and his message came through: "With deep regret and a very saddened heart, I inform all members of CFA of the passing of our loyal, devoted secretary and treasurer and membership officer and editor of Fanfare, Tom Dumpleton. Tom passed away after a long illness. There will be more in the next edition of Fanfare. R.I.P. Tom Dumpleton from all members of Circus Fans of Australasia." And the other one I have comes from the National President of Apex 40, Mark Tranby, from Wynnum Manly in Brisbane in Queensland. "On behalf of the members of Apex 40 Australia-wide, we pass on our sincere condolences to the family and closest friends at the loss of our good friend and member, Tom. We as a group were made aware of that Tom had been taken to palliative care, and we were saddened to hear this news, and of course even sadder to hear of his passing. I will remember meeting Tom and his beautiful wife Lee at one of the first Rorts, which is the Apex 40 name for convention, and if you've ever been to one of them, you'll see why it's called a Rort and not a convention. The first I attended in Wyong when I retired from Apex in the mid-90s, and they made me and my wife Rosemary so very welcome. Real salt of the earth people. Tom always had a smile on his face, was always happy to share a yarn, so the camaraderie with Tom will be sorely missed, not only by the members of his Apex 40 group in Wyong, but by the regular attendees of the annual Rorts that I know he so loved attending. Vale Tom, I will make special mention of your loss at our Rort AGM in Lake Macquarie in May. Yours in Apex 40 forever, Mark Tranby." Okay, I think that's all I really need to talk about. Kerry has a eulogy that she'd like to share with you. So would you like to come forward, Kerry?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
You're right with the microphone, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Okay, I'm going to start by saying I don't normally read anything when I stand up the front of people, but I'm going to have to today. Okay, so I wish we had hours to stay and talk about Dad. There's so much to say. I am my father and my mother's daughter after all, so you know I could do it. Dad always used to say I was so much like Mum that I could talk forever, but I'm sure everyone here today knows that it wasn't just Mum who could talk. I know we're here today to remember Dad, but it's almost impossible to talk about Dad without Mum. They were a team. Mum and Dad, Tom and Lee, Auntie Lee and Uncle Tom, Grandma and Granddad. After 63 years of marriage, how could anyone remember them alone? I know Auntie Joan and Uncle Ken can, and remember them as a pair. The rest of us will. I read some comments on social media that Dad can rest in peace with Mum now. I can assure you that if Dad has anything to do with it, he won't. Resting was not something that Dad did very often, and he didn't really enjoy it. Even his past few months in hospital so sick, he would still complain about being lazy. Dad was a hard worker. He taught my brothers and I about work ethic and about service too. We wound up Dad's concreting business when he turned 70 in the hope that he might finally have some time to take things easy. But that didn't last long. Not long after, my brother Kevin bought a small food supply business, and Dad jumped at the chance to go to work with Kevin and Margaret, making deliveries to the local school canteens. I hear that Dad was very popular with all the canteen ladies. Dad was still working with Kevin at the age of 80. He just couldn't stop. I'm grateful for Dad's years with Apex and Lions. I can't tell you how many aunties and uncles I grew up with. I had so much fun putting show bags together to sell at the Brookie Show, walking up and down streets with buckets collecting money for the Red Cross calling, and I can still sing the song "Thank You Very Much for Your Kind Donation." And the funny money gambling nights that we had in the back of our place at Rosebery Street. Mum and Dad took us to Apex conventions. I was even lucky enough to, my brothers got left behind, to go to New Zealand and attend the WOCO conventions, where I was lucky enough to make a lifelong friend, and Sally Chapman Grundy is still in touch with me today since all those years ago. At a recent primary school reunion, my friends from primary school still remember Dad dropping me off at school in the tow truck. They also remembered Dad's train that he used to bring along to the carnivals. He was certainly memorable. Even my friends from primary school that hadn't seen him for 40 years still remembered him. The garage parties. Our lives wouldn't be complete without all the garage parties we'd have over the years. And this was not just in Gascoyne Road. We had them in Rosebery Street and everywhere, parties out the back. Mum and Dad always found the time and the money too to throw such wonderful parties for any occasion for us. Birthdays, Australia Day, get-togethers. Probably the biggest was Stephen and Vicky's engagement party that went over an entire long weekend. That was pretty amazing. Nothing was ever too much for Mum and Dad. Over the past months of visiting Dad in the hospital, he recounted many of his adventures with his dad. I found out that he used to sell women's lingerie together. Who'd have thought? Dad and Pop had lots of business ventures together. These recent chats with Dad made me realise how much Dad actually enjoyed doing things with his dad. And even though Dad would often dismiss Pop's days as a minister, one of the stories he regularly told people was about the time when Nana and Pop set up the church at the back of their house in Narrowena, and Nana would play the piano for the service. Dad was always secretly proud of all his family. He would often groan about having to take Mum to set up the shops to sell raffle tickets for the Red Cross. Or I remember when he said, when I graduated, how it just shows that anyone can get a degree. The funny thing is that behind all that, he would tell others how proud he was of everything that we did. He would tell everyone how clever Gary was at fixing cars, and how people would always ask for Gary's details to get him to do theirs. And all the clever ideas Gary had at saving time doing things. He was so proud of Kevin when Kevin started his business at Impulse Foods. He became Kevin's best word-of-mouth marketer. And he really loved his days with Kevin and Margaret and Kimmy. And I still remember when Stephen went off to Tamworth to manage his first Coles store. Everyone knew about it. Dad was so proud. And although he grumbled about having to have broth every day for the past year, he was so happy to tell people about how his son could cook up a storm. Mum openly told us how wonderful we all were, and I'm pretty sure in her eyes none of her children could do wrong. But even though Dad didn't always say it, there are many people in this room I know here today that confirmed just how proud Dad always was of each of his children and his grandchildren. I'd like to thank everyone here today for being part of Mum and Dad's lives. Your involvement in their lives gave them meaning and made them the happy people that they were. A very special thank you to Peter for being such a wonderful friend to Mum and Dad and for being here to support us all today. I can't tell you how much this means to me and the family. When Dad went into the hospital at the beginning of this year, it's been a long run, I kept telling Mum she couldn't have him yet. I wanted more time with him. But as much as he loved every one of us, his true love was Mum. And now they're together.
Thank you, Kerry. We now have a visual tribute, and we will listen to Dusty Springfield this time, the song Going Back, which is most appropriate when we look back on Tom's life.
I think I'm going back to the things I learned so well in my youth. I think I'm returning to those days when
life to win. I can recall a time when I wasn't ashamed to reach out to a friend. And now I think I've got a lot more than a skipping rope to lend. Now there's more to do than watch my sailboat glide, and every day can be my magic carpet ride, and I can play hide and seek with my fears and live my days instead of counting my years. Let everyone debate the true reality. I'd rather see the world the way it used to be. A little bit of freedom's all we like. So catch me if you can, I'm going there.
I bet that brought many happy memories back for many of you. It certainly did for me. We now have some words from loved ones, and Kerry tells me some invited friends and family of Tom. Are they there to come forward and do that? This is Margaret, is it? Yes.
Sorry, put these on. Getting old. Hi everyone, I'm Margaret. I'm Tom's daughter-in-law. I married Kevin. 38 years ago, Tom was talking to a friend in real estate. He told him of a nice block of land in the Wyonga-Tuggeranong area on his books for sale. Tom thought, this would be a good opportunity. I'll check with my son. Kevin then brought that block of land. And then another friend of Tom's happened to be a builder. He then again thought, I'll check with my son. Our house was built. That house is now our home. And I'd just like to say thank you, Dad, for always making sure we were off to a great start. Many times I would come home from work to find my lawns mowed, a pile of sticks here or there, or my very crooked clothesline with 2 strands of line, now standing tall and straight with 6 strands of new line, and I was able to wash and fill that clothesline up all weekend with all my washing. Thank you, Dad, for all those little things that were a big, big help. When I rang Mum to say, to thank Dad, Dad would just say he loves doing the little things to help. So it was a huge, huge, big help for us. My children were always treated to the circus by Granddad. He always took them to the circus, to their first circus performance. Granddad always loved seeing their faces light up, and the kids would talk for days and days about the most exciting act, and all the grandchildren to this day still love the circus, as you're well aware. Grandad, always thank you for sharing your passion with our kids. I'm sure you all know Tom worked us for over 6 years. Kerry touched on that, and delivering to the school canteens. And that time he made a lot of friends with the canteen ladies. Mum always said he had different girlfriends around the different schools. They all loved him, and even like Dad would put up circus posters in the canteens, or get the ladies to, and he even bribed them by giving them a couple of circus tickets, which they all loved. We are so grateful for all he has done, helping us grow our business. Working alongside Dad was an absolute pleasure, and something we all, Kevin, Kim, myself, will always treasure. Thank you again, Dad, for a job well done. We miss you, Dad, Grandad, my beautiful father-in-law, but we know you will always be with us, forever in our hearts. So even though we are hurting, we know you are together again with Mum. So Mum and Dad, Grandma and Grandad, Lee and Tom, we love you, and thank you for all the little things. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Is there anyone else who is coming up to say anything? We now come to the committal, and if you're able, can I ask you please to stand just while we have the committal of Tom's body. Tom, this is not just goodbye, but thank you. Thank you for touching our lives and giving us joy. Thank you for the memories that we will cherish forever. Thank you for the good times and for your love and loyalty to your family and friends. Tom, your life we honour, in grief at your death, but gratitude for your life and for the privilege of sharing it with you. We commit your body for cremation, but most of all, Tom, we thank you for being you. You leave the world a better place. Please be seated. Again, can I thank you all for your presence here today to honour Tom's life. A special thank you must go to Tom's granddaughter Elise, who, just like her grandfather, gets on with things and gets the job done. Grandad will be proud of the way you have organised and planned today's funeral, Elise. Also, the family have asked me to thank those people who made Tom's last months in hospital more bearable. Mari Hilbram, Sandra Bowman from Apex 40, and Kay from Gascoigne Road for her visits, the volunteers and nurses at Gosford Hospital, his CFA friends, Circus Friends of Australasia of course, for their phone calls, especially Michael Robertson from Victoria, who kept Tom company by phoning him almost every day for chats. The family invites you to stay for tea and coffee and snacks at the function centre, which is located near the car park. Transport is available. Please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you for your attendance. The farewell song, For the Life of Me.
How can there be a song without the music? How can there be a wave without the sea? The lightning needs the thunder as a speaking voice. Oh yeah. And I must have you for the life of me. How can there be a baby with no crying? A future with no past can never be. A hummingbird can't live unless it's free to fly. Oh, and I must have you for the life of me. I know that sunshine follows rain. I know that pleasure follows pain. And I know that I must have you somehow. Every ship waits for the crew, and every rose waits for the dew. But I need you right now. How can there be an end with no beginning? So run to me, I'm waiting helplessly. And break these shackles of impatience. Oh, make me live. Oh, yeah. For I must have you for the life of